If you have very few friends, psychology says you possess these rare strengths. Number 1, you have exceptionally high standards for who gets access to your life. Your friend count is low because your standards are high, not in a superficial way. You're not filtering for status, wealth, or popularity. You're filtering for integrity, emotional intelligence, consistency, and depth. And those qualities are devastatingly rare. You've noticed that most people are fair-weather friends. Present during good times, absent during hard ones. They celebrate your wins but can't handle your struggles. They want the fun version of you but disappear when you're going through something real. Psychology calls this conditional social support, and your nervous system has learned to detect it instantly. You're looking for people who show up, who follow through, who can hold space for difficult emotions without trying to fix you or change the subject. Who are honest even when it's uncomfortable. And you've realized that most people can't do this. So instead of lowering your standards to fill an arbitrary friend quota, you maintain your standards and accept the small circle that comes with it. Number 2, you're radically self-sufficient. Most people use friendships as emotional scaffolding. They need others to validate their feelings, solve their problems, entertain them when they're bored, and provide constant reassurance that they're okay. You don't. Research shows this trait as low social dependency, and it's far rarer than people realize. You can entertain yourself, regulate your own emotions, and find comfort in your own company without external validation. You don't need someone to text back immediately to feel secure. You don't need plans every weekend to feel like your life has value. You don't need a packed social calendar to prove you're likable. This level of independence can look like isolation from the outside, but from the inside, it feels like freedom. You've built an internal world rich enough that you don't require constant external stimulation. People mistake this for coldness or detachment, but it's actually emotional maturity. You've developed the ability to self-soothe, self-motivate, and self-validate. These are skills most people never learn because they always have someone else doing that work for them. Number 3, you process inauthenticity like a threat. If you have few friends, your brain likely has a hypersensitive detector for fake behavior. You can feel when someone is performing instead of being real, when they're saying what they think you want to hear instead of what they actually think, when they're managing their image instead of showing you who they are, and it doesn't just annoy you. It activates your threat response. Neuroscience research on social cognition shows that some individuals have heightened activation in brain regions associated with detecting incongruence between verbal and nonverbal communication. Your brain flags inauthenticity as dangerous because on some level, it is. People who lie, manipulate, or wear masks are unpredictable. You can't trust them, and your nervous system refuses to relax around people it can't trust. Most people tolerate fake friendships because they fear being alone. You've realized that being alone is far less painful than being surrounded by people who don't actually see you. While others collect acquaintances like trophies, you're sitting at home fully aware that an empty contact list is better than one filled with people who would ghost you the moment you stopped being useful or entertaining. You don't need friends who perform friendship. You need people who practice it. And since those people are rare, your circle stays small by design. Number 4, you understand that solitude and loneliness are not the same thing. This is the trait that separates you from people who are genuinely suffering from isolation. You've learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. Loneliness is a painful craving for connection you don't have. Solitude is a chosen state that restores you. And psychology confirms that people with few friends who aren't distressed by it score high on measures of autonomous functioning and internal locus of control. You've discovered that you can be completely alone and feel whole, grounded, at peace. You don't need someone else in the room to feel like you exist. You don't need constant texts, calls, or plans to feel connected to life. This isn't numbness or disconnection. It's self-completeness. You've cultivated a relationship with yourself so solid that external relationships become optional rather than essential. Number 5. You don't rely on social validation to feel stable. Many people maintain friendships because they need mirrors. They need reassurance, approval, constant feedback that they are accepted. You don't. You can sit alone without feeling erased. You don't panic in silence. You don't need constant interaction to confirm your worth. This doesn't make you cold. It makes you internally anchored. You generate stability from within, which is why you don't chase connection just to feel okay. Number 6. You would rather be alone than emotionally misaligned. This is the truth most people never say out loud. Being around the wrong people feels worse than being alone, and your nervous system knows it. So when connection requires self-betrayal, emotional shrinking, or constant performance, you choose solitude instead, not because you gave up, but because you refuse to abandon yourself for belonging. Number 7. You are comfortable with your own inner world. Many people fear being alone because silence brings them face to face with themselves. You don't run from that, you think. Reflect, analyze, create. Your solitude is often active, not empty. You write, build, research, learn, mentally rehearse life. Your inner world is rich enough that you don't need constant external stimulation. That's not loneliness. That's psychological self-sufficiency. I'll be sharing more videos like this on emotional growth, psychology, and self-understanding. Subscribe if this content resonates with you.
Let's get straight to it. Number 1, hyper-independence. You don't ask for help, you figure things out alone. You've built a life where you don't need anyone for anything, and on the surface that looks impressive. People admire your self-sufficiency, but you know the truth underneath. You're not independent by choice, you're independent by necessity. As a child, when you reached out and no one responded, when you cried and no one came, when you needed comfort and found emptiness, your developing brain made a brutal calculation. Emotional needs are dangerous, so it shut them down. You learn not to need, not because you're strong, but because needing and not receiving is more painful than not needing at all. Attachment research shows that children who experience emotional neglect often develop what's called dismissive avoidant attachment. Your nervous system learned that relying on others leads to disappointment, so it built walls that keep everyone out. Now, as an adult, when someone offers help, your first instinct is refusal. When someone gets close, your body tenses. When someone asks what you need, you go blank because you genuinely don't know anymore. You've trained yourself so thoroughly to not need that the circuitry for receiving care has atrophied. This hyper-independence isn't confidence, it's a survival mechanism. And the cost is that you're carrying weight you were never meant to carry alone, but you can't put it down because letting someone else hold it feels more terrifying than collapsing under it. Number 2, emotional numbness. People say you're distant, unfeeling, hard to read. They accuse you of not caring when the truth is you care so much it would destroy you if you let yourself feel it fully, so you don't. You've developed what psychology calls emotional blunting, a defense mechanism where your brain dampens emotional intensity to protect you from overwhelm. When you were young and your emotions went unwitnessed, when your pain was ignored, when your joy was met with indifference, your nervous system learned that feelings are useless. They don't change anything, they don't bring comfort, they just hurt. So your brain started turning down the volume. Neuroscience shows that chronic emotional neglect can lead to decreased activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, the region responsible for emotional awareness and regulation. You're not choosing to be numb, your brain is protecting you the only way it knows how. The problem is you can't selectively numb. When you shut down pain, you also shut down joy. When you protect yourself from hurt, you also block out love. So you move through life in a muted state, observing your own emotions from a distance, knowing you should feel something but experiencing it like it's happening to someone else. Others see this as strength or stoicism, but you know it's not strength, it's absence. And the loneliest part is that no one sees how hard you're working just to feel anything at all. Number 3, you default to emotional self-reliance. You were the child who didn't cry when you fell, who comforted yourself when you were scared, who learned to regulate your own emotions because no one else was going to do it for you. And now, as an adult, you pride yourself on not being needy, on handling your problems alone, on never burdening anyone. But developmental psychology reveals something painful. Children aren't supposed to self-soothe at that level. They're supposed to co-regulate with a caregiver who mirrors their emotions, helps them make sense of feelings, and teaches them that emotional distress is temporary and manageable. You didn't get that, so you became your own parent. You developed what psychologists call precocious emotional autonomy. The issue is that true emotional maturity isn't self-sufficiency. It's interdependence. It's knowing when to lean on others and trusting they'll hold you. But you never learned that trust. So you handle everything alone, not because you're capable, but because asking for support triggers the old wound of asking and receiving nothing. You've built an identity around not needing anyone, and it keeps you safe, but it also keeps you isolated. Because the truth is, you do need people. You just can't let yourself admit it. And that contradiction exhausts you in ways you can't explain to anyone, because admitting you're tired of being strong would require the exact vulnerability you've spent your life avoiding. Number 4, hypervigilance. You notice everything. The slight shift in someone's voice, the micro-expression that flashes across their face, the pause before they answer. You're constantly scanning for signs that someone is upset, disappointed, or pulling away. And you do this unconsciously, automatically, because your childhood taught you that emotional shifts are dangerous. When a caregiver's mood was unpredictable, when affection appeared and disappeared without warning, when you never knew which version of them you'd get, your brain developed a survival skill. Hyper-awareness of emotional cues. You became an expert at reading people so you could brace for impact. This is what trauma specialists call hypervigilance, a state where your nervous system is constantly scanning for threat. But the threat isn't physical, it's emotional. You're watching for the moment someone decides you're too much, not enough, or no longer worth their time, and this vigilance is exhausting. You can't relax into relationships because you're always monitoring them, always looking for the crack, the sign, the warning that they're about to leave. Others think you're overthinking or insecure. But what you're actually doing is trying to control an outcome you learned early was inevitable. You're trying to see abandonment coming so it doesn't blindside you the way it did when you were small and had no defense against it. Number 5, love feels like a threat. When someone is kind to you, your first instinct isn't gratitude, it's suspicion. You don't trust it, you wait for the cost, the expectation, the moment they reveal why they were being nice. Because in your experience, care isn't free. It comes with conditions, it has to be earned. And even when you earn it, it can vanish without explanation. So when someone offers you unconditional love, your nervous system doesn't recognize it. It feels foreign, uncomfortable, even threatening. Psychologists call this phenomenon disorganized attachment, where your system both craves and fears closeness. Neurologically, this happens because your brain's reward pathways, the circuits that should light up in response to warmth and affection, are underdeveloped. When you didn't receive consistent emotional nourishment as a child, those pathways didn't strengthen. So now, as an adult, receiving care doesn't feel good. It feels confusing. Your body doesn't know what to do with it. You deflect compliments. You minimize your needs. You push away the exact thing you're starving for because accepting it requires vulnerability you're not sure you can survive. And the cruelest part is that people interpret this as you not wanting love, when the truth is you want it so badly it terrifies you. You just don't believe you're allowed to have it without it destroying you. Number 6. Being low maintenance is self-erasure. You don't complain, you don't ask for much. You're easy to be around because you don't rock the boat. People love this about you. They call you chill, flexible, drama-free. But underneath, you're not being low maintenance by choice. You're being invisible by design. As a child, when your needs were ignored or met with frustration, you learned that having needs makes you a burden, so you erased them. You became small, quiet, accommodating. You learned to take up as little space as possible so that people wouldn't have a reason to leave. Psychology recognizes this as a fawn response, one of the lesser-known trauma responses where you people-please and self-abandon to maintain connection. You don't state preferences because you genuinely believe your preferences don't matter. You don't set boundaries because you're terrified that having boundaries makes you difficult. You've convinced yourself that being easy is how you earn the right to be loved. But what you've actually done is teach people that you don't have needs. And when you finally do express a need, it feels so foreign, so uncomfortable that you immediately apologize for it. You're not low maintenance, you're self-erasing. And the tragedy is that you're disappearing to make room for people who wouldn't leave if you took up space. You just don't believe that yet. Number 7, profound emotional endurance. You've been through more than most people will ever know and you act like it's nothing. You normalize pain, you minimize struggle. When people share their problems, you listen with empathy, but when it's your turn, you shrug it off. You've developed what psychologists call normalized trauma response, where you've carried pain for so long it feels like baseline existence. You don't recognize how much you've survived because survival is all you've ever known. You think everyone feels this way, distant from themselves, heavy with unnamed grief, exhausted by existence, but they don't. Most people didn't grow up learning to function without emotional oxygen. What you call normal, psychology calls resilience under chronic adversity. You've been running on empty for so long you think that's how life works. And that endurance is extraordinary, but it's also costing you. Because you're so used to surviving that you don't know how to live. You don't know what it feels like to be nourished instead of just not starving, to be held instead of just not falling apart, to rest instead of just not collapsing. You've built an entire identity around endurance, and it's kept you alive, but it's also kept you from recognizing that you deserve more than survival. You deserve softness, care, ease. But asking for those things requires believing you're worth them. And that belief was stolen from you before you had words to name what you were losing. I'll be sharing more videos like this on emotional growth, psychology, and self-understanding. Subscribe if someone hates you and you have no idea why. You didn't insult them, didn't take anything from them, didn't cross a line, you just exist. And somehow that's enough for them to treat you like you're the problem. The coldness is obvious. The sarcasm cuts. The way they look at you like you've already been judged and found guilty. You replay every conversation, analyze every word you said, wonder if you're too confident, too quiet, too much, too little. You start performing, softening yourself, trying to prove you're not whatever villain they've decided you are. But here's what psychology reveals: their hatred isn't a response to you, it's a response to what you trigger inside them. It's projection psychology at its rawest. And understanding this doesn't just free you from their judgment, it reveals something profound about human nature itself. So let's start. Number 1, you don't need them, and that's unforgivable. Some people are addicted to being needed. They've built their worth on rescuing, fixing, managing other people's emotions. And you don't need rescuing. You're not broken. You're not begging for their validation. You're fine without them. And that destroys them, because if you don't need them, they have no power, no leverage, no way to make themselves feel important. They can't save you, can't control you, can't make you dependent on their approval, so they hate you for it. They call you arrogant, detached, cold. Anything to avoid admitting the truth. You're just not giving them the narcissistic supply they're hunting for. Number 2, they're trapped in threat-based identity. These people have built their entire sense of self around being in danger. Their nervous system is stuck in hypervigilance. The world isn't a place of possibility to them. It's a battlefield, and everyone is either an ally or a threat. When you show up calm, grounded, or self-assured, their brain doesn't register safety. It registers competition, because people with threat-based identities operate from scarcity. They believe there's only so much success, love, or value to go around. Your confidence doesn't inspire them. It activates their amygdala, the part of their brain that screams, "If they're winning, I'm losing." This is what psychologists call zero-sum thinking. They can't celebrate your light because in their internal economy, your brightness means their dimness. You're not doing anything to them. But your very existence challenges the story they've been telling themselves, that the world is against them, that they're the victim, that nothing good comes easy. You're living proof that's not true, and they can't forgive you for it. Number 3. You trigger their unhealed past. This is the one most people miss. They don't actually hate you. They hate the person you remind them of, a parent who was cold, a sibling who was favored, an ex who left, a friend who betrayed them. You're not that person, but your energy, your presence, your way of being triggers a wound they never healed. And instead of doing the work to separate past from present, they project. They replay the same trauma with you as the villain. They punish you for crimes you didn't commit, hate you for pain you didn't cause. You're not their enemy, you're their unfinished business, and they're too broken to see the difference. Number 4, they're defending their shadow self. Carl Jung identified a phenomenon where people reject in others what they can't accept in themselves. It's called shadow projection. Everything they've repressed, denied, or disowned about themselves gets projected onto someone else. Usually someone who embodies it freely. Maybe you're honest and they've been lying for years. Maybe you're free and they're imprisoned by others' expectations. Maybe you're successful and they've been making excuses. Your existence forces them to confront their shadow. The parts of themselves they buried because they were taught those parts were unacceptable. And instead of integrating their shadow, which requires brutal self-honesty, they demonize it in you. They call you arrogant when you're just confident. They call you cold when you're just boundaried. They call you selfish when you're just self-respecting. They're not describing you, they're describing what they're terrified to become. Or terrified to admit they want to be. Number 5, they're experiencing ego-dystonic dissonance. There's a painful psychological phenomenon that happens when someone's internal self-concept clashes with external reality. They believe they're confident, but they're actually insecure. They think they're authentic, but they're performing. They claim they're happy, but they're hollow. Then you walk into the room. And without saying a word, without trying, you embody what they're pretending to be. You're actually confident, actually authentic, actually at peace. And that creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, so severe it feels like a threat. Their brain has 2 options. Admit they've been lying to themselves for years or make you the problem. Guess which one the ego chooses. It's not personal, you're just the mirror they didn't ask for. And instead of looking at their reflection and growing, they're trying to shatter the mirror. Number 7, you're succeeding where they're failing and it's killing them. You're building something, growing, moving forward, and they're stuck, stagnant. Repeating the same patterns, making the same excuses, blaming the same external forces for why their life isn't working. And watching you succeed is unbearable. Not because they don't want good things for you, but because your progress is proof that change is possible, that excuses are just excuses, that if they really wanted it, they could have it too. Your growth forces them to confront their own stagnation. And instead of using that as motivation, they use it as ammunition. They tear you down, minimize your wins, find flaws in your success, anything to avoid the crushing realization that the only thing stopping them is themselves. Number 8. They need you to be the problem. This is the core of it. As long as you're the villain, they don't have to look inward. As long as they can blame you for their discomfort, their triggers, their bad mood, they get to avoid accountability. You become the reason they're unhappy, the excuse for why they can't move forward, the scapegoat for every unresolved issue they're carrying. It's easier to hate you than to heal themselves. Easier to make you wrong than to admit they're the common denominator in all their failed relationships. Easier to villainize you than to sit with the painful truth that they're the ones sabotaging their own life. You're not their problem. You're their distraction from the problem. So here's what you do with this information. Nothing, you do nothing, you don't defend yourself, don't try to prove you're good, don't shrink to make them comfortable, don't perform to earn their approval. Because people who hate you for no reason aren't interested in the truth. They're invested in the story they've created. And no amount of people-pleasing will change that story. You'll just exhaust yourself trying. Let them hate you. Let them be wrong about you. Let them waste their energy on resentment while you spend yours on building a life that doesn't require their permission. Their hate is not your burden, it's their prison, and you're free. The people who are meant for you won't need convincing. They'll see you clearly. They'll value what you bring. They won't punish you for being whole. And the ones who hate you without reason, they're doing you a favor. They're showing you exactly who not to waste your time on. If this hit, say it in the comments. I'll be sharing more videos.
Let's get straight to it. Number 1. You've developed advanced emotional self-sufficiency. There's a question people always ask when they discover you prefer staying home. Don't you get lonely? And the truth is, loneliness and being alone are not the same thing. You've learned the difference, and it's changed everything. What you've developed is what attachment theory calls secure solitude. You don't need constant connection to feel emotionally regulated. You don't require external validation to know your worth. You've built an internal emotional ecosystem that sustains you without constant input from others. This doesn't mean you don't value relationships. It means you've stopped outsourcing your emotional stability to other people. You can sit with yourself in silence without spiraling into existential dread or reaching for your phone to fill the void. That's not isolation, that's integration. Most people are terrified of being alone with their own thoughts. They need noise, distraction, or company to avoid confronting themselves. But you've done the inner work that makes solitude feel safe rather than threatening. You've made peace with who you are when no one is watching, and that's a level of psychological maturity that many people never achieve. Neuroscience shows that people comfortable with extended solitude often have stronger connectivity in the brain's default mode network, the system responsible for self-reflection, introspection, and meaning-making. When you're alone at home, your brain isn't idle. It's consolidating experiences, processing emotions, and integrating your sense of self in ways that require uninterrupted quiet. This is why forced socializing feels so jarring to you. It interrupts a process that's crucial to your psychological well-being. You're not avoiding people. You're protecting the space where you become more fully yourself. People who lack this capacity often mistake your self-sufficiency for coldness or detachment. They can't imagine being content without constant social contact, so they assume you must be suffering in silence, but you know the truth. You're not lonely at home, you're complete, and that completeness doesn't require anyone else's presence to validate it. This trait is perhaps the most misunderstood of all, because it threatens the social narrative that connection is the only path to happiness. But you've discovered something deeper, that true connection with others is only possible when you're first connected to yourself. And that connection requires solitude, silence, and the sanctuary of home. Number 2. You have a low tolerance for performative socializing. If you love staying home, you've likely noticed a painful pattern when you do go out. Most people aren't actually listening to each other, they're just waiting for their turn to speak. You find large social gatherings draining, not because you're shy, but because they're often filled with surface-level noise. You would rather sit in silence than participate in a conversation where people are wearing masks, trying to impress each other, or faking interest. Your home is the one place where you don't have to perform, you don't have to dress up, you don't have to smile when you aren't happy, and you don't have to explain yourself. You value authenticity so highly that you'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who are just pretending. This isn't antisocial behavior. It's what psychologists call high authenticity orientation. Your nervous system has developed a keen detector for emotional dishonesty, and when it senses inauthenticity, it triggers the same stress response as physical danger. Your brain is protecting you from what it perceives as a threat to your psychological integrity. Research in social neuroscience shows that people with high authenticity orientation experience genuine distress in performative environments. Their anterior cingulate cortex, the part of the brain that detects conflict between values and actions, shows heightened activity in situations requiring emotional pretense. You're not being difficult. Your brain is simply refusing to operate in a mode that conflicts with your core values. When you choose to stay home rather than attend yet another obligation where you'll have to fake enthusiasm, you're making a deeply intelligent decision. You're choosing psychological congruence over social approval, and that takes remarkable self-awareness. Number 3, you possess high sensory intelligence. For many people, a loud restaurant or a crowded street is just a Friday night, but for you, it feels like an assault on your nervous system. Psychology suggests that homebodies often score higher on sensory processing sensitivity. You notice the noise, the chaotic energy, and the demands of the environment more intensely than others. When you stay home, you aren't just sitting there. You're controlling your environment. You're curating the lighting, the temperature, and the sound levels. This isn't about fear, it's about optimization. You've learned that your brain works like a high-performance computer. It runs best when it isn't overheating from the data of 1,000 strangers. Neuroscience calls this sensory gating, and yours operates at a different threshold than most people's. While others can filter out background noise and visual clutter automatically, your brain processes more of the raw sensory input from your environment. This means you experience the world in higher definition, but it also means you reach cognitive overload faster. Think of it this way: most people have a sensory intake valve that automatically restricts input. Yours is wider, which means you collect more information, notice more details, and experience more depth. The trade-off is that you need more recovery time. Your home becomes essential, not optional. It's where you decompress from the sensory bombardment that others don't even register. This is why a quiet evening at home can feel more restorative than a week-long vacation for you. You're not missing out on life. You're engaging with it so fully when you're out that you need substantial downtime to process it all. Your preference for home isn't avoidance. It's the necessary counterbalance to your heightened perceptual system. Number 4, you have a strong internal locus of fulfillment. Society thinks you're doing nothing at home, but you're likely busier than anyone knows. You're reading, creating, learning, building, or simply thinking deeply about ideas that matter to you. While others need external stimulation to feel alive, you generate your own sense of meaning from within. This is what psychologists call an internal locus of fulfillment, and it's one of the strongest predictors of long-term life satisfaction. You don't need a crowd to validate your existence. You don't need constant activity to feel productive. You've developed the rare ability to be genuinely content in your own company, pursuing interests that require sustained focus and solitude. Your home isn't a hiding place. It's a laboratory of the self. It's where you experiment with new skills, work through complex problems, and engage in the kind of deep work that's impossible in fragmented, distraction-filled environments. While the world equates visibility with value, you understand that the most meaningful work often happens in private. Research on creativity and productivity consistently shows that breakthroughs require extended periods of uninterrupted solitude. Your preference for staying home isn't laziness. It's an unconscious alignment with the conditions that foster genuine growth and innovation. You're not withdrawn. You're deeply engaged with pursuits that matter to you, pursuits that don't require an audience to have value. People often mistake your absence from social events as disinterest in life, but the opposite is true. You're so interested in developing your capacities and exploring your curiosities that you protect the time and space required to do so. That's not isolation, that's intentional living. Number 5, you practice superior energy economics. Here's what most people don't understand about your preference for home. You're not conserving energy because you have less of it. You're allocating it with precision because you understand its value. Psychology recognizes this as high conscientiousness paired with interoceptive awareness. You can feel when your energy reserves are depleting, and you respond proactively rather than pushing through until you crash. This is an advanced form of self-regulation that most people never develop. Every social interaction, every environmental demand, every switch in context costs you energy. You've done the math, often unconsciously, and you've realized that many social obligations offer negative returns. They drain more than they give. So you opt out, not because you're incapable of handling them, but because you've evolved past the need to prove that you can. This is what economists call opportunity cost analysis, applied to your life energy. When you decline an invitation to stay home, you're not choosing nothing over something. You're choosing reading over small talk, creation over consumption, deep rest over shallow entertainment, meaningful solitude over obligatory togetherness. Your friends might interpret this as flakiness or disinterest, but you're actually demonstrating something far more sophisticated. You're refusing to spend your most valuable resource on experiences that don't align with your values or contribute to your well-being. That's not selfishness, that's self-respect. Research in positive psychology shows that people who actively manage their energy based on internal signals rather than external expectations report higher levels of sustained happiness and lower rates of burnout. You're not missing out on life by staying home. You're engineering a life that works for your specific operating system. If you recognize yourself in these traits, understand this. Your preference for home isn't a flaw that needs fixing. It's a feature of a nervous system that values depth over breadth, authenticity over performance, and intentional solitude over obligatory socializing. I'll be sharing more videos like this on emotional growth, psychology, and self-understanding. Subscribe if this content resonates. If you've always felt older than your years, you likely possess these 8 rare psychological traits that set you apart. Number 1. You experience chronological dissonance. There's a psychological term for what you feel: temporal identity misalignment. Your internal sense of self doesn't match the age on your birth certificate. When you were 15, you felt 30. Now that you're 30, you feel like you've lived 3 lifetimes. This isn't about maturity in the traditional sense. It's about consciousness. Research in developmental psychology shows that certain individuals develop abstract thinking and existential awareness far earlier than their peers. While other children were absorbed in games, you were asking questions about purpose, meaning, and mortality. Your brain didn't skip childhood. It simply processed the deeper layers of existence simultaneously. You weren't trying to be different. Your neural pathways were just wired to see the bigger picture from the beginning. This creates a permanent sense of being out of sync, not because you're broken, but because you're operating on a different temporal frequency than those around you. Number 2, you experience time as non-linear. Here's where it gets strange. Old souls often report feeling like they've lived before, or like certain places and eras feel more like home than their actual birthplace. Whether you believe in past lives or not, there's a psychological explanation for this. It's called temporal fluidity, a sense that time isn't a straight line, but a fabric you can feel across multiple points. Some researchers suggest this is your brain's way of processing ancestral memory or collective unconscious archetypes. Others believe it's advanced empathy, your ability to step so fully into historical contexts that they feel lived rather than learned. Whatever the mechanism, the result is the same. You feel connected to eras you never experienced. You're nostalgic for decades before you were born. You resonate with old music, old literature, old ways of thinking. Not because they're superior, but because they feel familiar in a way you can't quite articulate. This isn't escapism. It's a sense of temporal belonging that transcends your birth year. You're not rejecting the present. You're simply acknowledging that your soul seems to carry echoes of something older. Number 3, you carry an intrinsic mortality awareness. Most people live as if they're immortal. You've never had that luxury. From a young age, you've been acutely aware that time is finite, that every moment is unrepeatable, that life is shorter than anyone wants to admit. Psychology calls this thanatophobia when it becomes pathological, but for old souls, it's simply reality orientation. You aren't morbid, you're honest. This awareness shapes everything. It's why you can't waste time on meaningless drama. It's why you cut toxic people out without hesitation. It's why you prioritize depth over breadth in relationships. When you know, truly know, that you have a limited number of heartbeats left, you become radically selective about how you spend them. Other people call this intensity. You call it sanity. While they're debating trivial matters, you're thinking about legacy, impact, and what actually matters when everything else falls away. This mortality awareness isn't depression. It's the psychological foundation of an old soul, the thing that makes you value meaning over entertainment, substance over distraction. Number 4, you default to philosophical frameworks. When something goes wrong in your life, your first instinct isn't to complain or seek sympathy. It's to contextualize. You immediately zoom out and ask the bigger questions. What is this teaching me? How does this fit into the larger pattern? What would this look like from a distance? This is called metacognitive reflection, and it's one of the clearest markers of an old soul mentality. While others are drowning in the immediate emotions of a situation, you're already 3 levels above it, analyzing it like a philosopher analyzing a case study. This doesn't mean you don't feel pain. You feel it deeply, but you also process it through frameworks of meaning, growth, and perspective. You can't help but see your own life as a narrative, a story unfolding with themes, lessons, and character development. This is why you recover from setbacks faster than others expect. Not because you're cold, but because you've already placed the experience into a philosophical container that makes sense of the suffering. You're not just living life. You're studying it in real time. Number 5, you are hypersensitive to inauthenticity. You can smell a fake from across the room. The moment someone starts performing, putting on a persona, or saying what they think they should say instead of what they actually think, you feel it like nails on a chalkboard. This isn't judgment, it's sensory sensitivity to social dishonesty. Research in social psychology shows that individuals with high emotional intelligence and pattern recognition can detect micro-expressions and vocal inconsistencies that reveal when someone is being inauthentic. For you, this happens automatically. You're not trying to catch people in lies. Your brain just processes authenticity as a baseline requirement for engagement. This is why you have so few close friends. Most people are too busy managing their image to show you who they really are. And you'd rather be alone than spend time with someone's representative. You don't need a crowd, you need real. One genuine conversation with someone who drops their mask is worth more to you than 100 shallow exchanges with people who are still pretending. Number 6. You experience social exhaustion at an accelerated rate. For most people, socializing is energizing. For you, it's a resource drain. You can feel your energy physically depleting in group settings, especially when conversations stay shallow. This isn't introversion, though many old souls are introverts. This is something deeper. It's called social cognitive load intolerance. Your brain processes social interactions on multiple levels simultaneously. You're not just hearing words. You're analyzing tone, body language, subtext, ulterior motives, and emotional states. You're cross-referencing what people say with what they mean, what they claim to value with how they actually behave. This multi-layered processing is exhausting. It's like running 10 programs on a computer while everyone else is running too. By the time a social event ends, you're not just tired, you're depleted. You need hours, sometimes days, to recover. And here's the thing, you've learned that most social situations don't justify that energy expenditure. So you decline invitations, you stay home, you protect your reserves. Not because you hate people, but because you respect your own cognitive bandwidth too much to waste it on interactions that leave you emptier than you started. Number 7. You possess an inherent distrust of consensus. When everyone agrees on something, your first instinct is to question it. Not because you're contrarian, but because you've seen how often the majority is wrong. You've watched society embrace ideas that collapse a generation later. You've seen crowds cheer for things that history condemns. This gives you a healthy skepticism toward popular opinion. Psychologists call this intellectual independence, the ability to think critically without needing external validation. You don't follow trends, you don't adopt beliefs just because they're widely accepted. You interrogate everything, even your own assumptions, especially your own assumptions. This makes you unpopular sometimes. People mistake your questioning for negativity, but you're not being negative, you're being thorough. You refuse to outsource your thinking to the crowd because you've learned that crowds are often driven by emotion, not evidence. You'd rather stand alone with the truth than blend in with a comfortable lie. Number 8. You possess pattern recognition hypersensitivity. Old souls don't just see what's happening, they see what's going to happen. You walk into a room and within minutes, you've mapped the social dynamics, identified the power structures, and predicted how conversations will unfold. This isn't psychic ability, it's advanced pattern recognition. Neuroscience research suggests that individuals with old soul traits show heightened activity in the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for anticipating consequences and recognizing patterns. You've lived enough emotional cycles, witnessed enough human behavior, that your brain has built a vast internal database. When someone starts telling you their story, you already know how it ends because you've seen this pattern 100 times before. This is why small talk exhausts you. You aren't being rude when you seem disengaged. Your brain is simply bored by predictable loops. You crave depth because surface interactions don't activate your neural reward system anymore. You need complexity, nuance, and layers because your pattern recognition system has already solved the simple equations. I'll be sharing more videos like this on emotional growth, psychology, and self-understanding. Subscribe if this content resonates with you. Before smartphones, before constant notifications, before life felt so fast, Gen X grew up in a completely different world. If you were born between 1965 and 1980, you probably remember a slower rhythm of life, a world where afternoons could stretch endlessly, and silence wasn't something to escape from. This generation was shaped during a time of transition, long before the digital world took over everyday life. So today, we're looking at the psychology of Gen X, those born between 1965 and 1980, and the mental patterns they developed growing up in a slower, less distracted world. Number 1. Early independence shaped the brain. If you're part of Gen X, independence wasn't something you were taught in a workshop or encouraged with motivational quotes. It was simply expected. You were trusted to figure things out early, sometimes earlier than you felt ready for. Many children from that era spent long stretches of time without adult supervision. You walked to school on your own. You played outside until the streetlights came on. You solved problems without immediately asking for help. And when something went wrong, you didn't always run to an adult first. you tried to fix it yourself. From a psychological perspective, this mattered more than people realized at the time. Independence during childhood strengthens what psychologists call executive functioning. That includes decision-making, self-control, planning, and emotional regulation. In simple terms, your brain learned early how to manage itself. This is why many adults who grew up in that era have a strong inner compass. They're comfortable making decisions alone. They don't panic easily when something breaks or plans fall apart. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing, I've handled things before. I'll figure this out too. However, this early independence also came with a hidden cost. Because help wasn't always readily offered, many learned to suppress the instinct to ask for support. Even today, people from this generation often prefer to struggle privately rather than lean on others. Psychology doesn't see this as weakness, it sees it as conditioning. A brain trained early for self-reliance doesn't automatically reach outward, it turns inward first. Number 2, emotional resilience over emotional expression. If you're Gen X, chances are you grew up in a time when emotions weren't something you talked about openly. Your parents didn't ask how you were feeling, not because they didn't care, but because feelings weren't the currency of daily life. You fell off your bike, scraped your knee, and your mom glanced at it. You're fine, she said, and you were. Not because the pain wasn't real, but because the response taught you something crucial. You could survive discomfort. You could move through pain. You didn't need someone to validate every emotional experience in order to recover from it. This wasn't emotional neglect. It was a different model entirely. One built on the assumption that you were capable, that you could handle things, that your emotional world was yours to manage. The result was a generation that learned to self-soothe before they learned the term. You developed internal emotional regulation because there was no external emotional management system. When something upset you, you didn't have a feelings chart on the wall. You didn't have a parent kneeling down to eye level, asking you to name your emotion. You had your bedroom, your bike, your friends, and time. You weren't taught to suppress emotions. You were taught that emotions didn't require an audience, that you could feel something deeply without needing to announce it, without needing someone to fix it. This created a particular kind of strength, not the kind that pretends nothing hurts, but the kind that hurts, processes, and moves forward, the kind that doesn't mistake feeling with incapacity. Today, there's a conversation about emotional availability, about creating space for feelings, about validation. And those things have value, but what often gets lost is the other side of the equation, the value of emotional self-sufficiency, the strength that comes from knowing you can sit with discomfort and come out the other side intact. You learned that early. And it's still there. Number 3, comfort with boredom. If you grew up as part of Gen X, boredom wasn't something you tried to escape. It was just part of the day. Long afternoons with nothing planned, evenings where time felt slow. Moments where there was simply nothing happening. Back then, boredom didn't come with anxiety. There was no instinct to immediately fill the silence, no screen to reach for, no endless stream of content waiting to distract you. Instead, your mind learned to sit with itself. You daydreamed, you imagined, you found small ways to entertain yourself. Psychologically, this mattered. Boredom activates the brain's default mode network, the part responsible for creativity, reflection, and deeper thinking. For Gen X, this mental state wasn't rare, it was familiar. That's why Gen X tends to value simple, quiet moments more deeply. A walk without headphones, sitting alone with music, watching the world without interacting with it. These aren't habits, they're echoes of a time when the mind had room to wander. Psychology suggests that this comfort with boredom helped Gen X develop patience, creativity, and emotional depth. Their minds learned that not every moment needs to be filled, and that sometimes, the most meaningful thoughts arrive in the quiet. Number 4, a strong sense of responsibility. For Gen X, responsibility wasn't something that arrived in adulthood. It was woven into childhood. From a young age, you were expected to contribute, to help, and to handle your part without needing reminders. Chores weren't framed as lessons, they were just part of life. You did what needed to be done because it was expected of you. There wasn't much negotiation. Responsibility wasn't praised loudly, it was assumed. Psychologically, this shaped a deep internal sense of accountability. Gen X learned early that actions had consequences, and that reliability mattered. When you said you'd do something, you did it. When you were given a task, it became yours to carry. This early responsibility trained the brain to value follow-through and self-discipline. Many Gen X adults still carry this mindset. They show up, they handle their obligations quietly, and they often feel uncomfortable relying on others to take over what they believe they should manage themselves. For Gen X, being responsible isn't just behavior, it's part of identity. Number 4, social skills were built face-to-face. For Gen X, social connection happened in real time. Conversations weren't planned through messages or delayed by screens. You talked when you were together, and when you weren't, you waited. That waiting was normal. Friendships were built through shared presence, sitting side by side, walking together, talking without interruptions. You learned how to read tone, body language, and silence because those were the only tools available. There was no rewind, no edit, no chance to rethink every word after it was said. Psychologically, this shaped strong social awareness. The brain learned to pick up on subtle emotional cues, facial expressions, pauses, shifts in energy. Gen X became comfortable with eye contact and natural conversation flow. There's a certain nostalgia tied to this, remembering long phone calls, unplanned visits, or simply sitting with someone without needing to fill every moment. These experiences trained patience and presence. You learned how to be with people, not just communicate with them. As adults, many Gen X individuals still carry this social grounding. They value depth over frequency. They prefer meaningful conversation over constant contact. And they often feel drained by surface-level interaction that lacks emotional weight. Number 5. Deep nostalgia lives strongly in adulthood. For Gen X, nostalgia isn't just remembering the past, it's feeling it. A song, a smell, a familiar sound can instantly pull you back, not just to a moment, but to a state of mind. The past feels emotionally textured, almost tangible. Psychologically, this happens because Gen X formed memories during a time of fewer distractions. Moments weren't competing with constant input. Experiences had space to settle deeply into the brain. That depth makes memories stronger and more emotionally vivid. There's a quiet longing here, not necessarily to return to the past, but to reconnect with how life felt then. Simpler. Slower, less crowded mentally. Many Gen X adults find comfort in revisiting old music, routines, or familiar places because it restores a sense of emotional safety. Nostalgia also plays a stabilizing role. Psychology shows that revisiting meaningful memories helps reinforce identity, especially during times of change or uncertainty. That's why the past feels rich rather than distant. It isn't about clinging to it. It's about carrying it forward quietly, like a familiar weight that brings comfort rather than burden. I'll be sharing more videos like this on emotional growth, psychology, and self-understanding. Subscribe if this content resonates with you.
It's 7 a.m., you make your first cup of coffee. By 9 a.m., you're pouring your second. Noon hits, that's number 3. 3 p.m. slump, coffee. 5 p.m. meeting, coffee. Your coworker watches you refill your mug for the 5th time today and asks, "Don't you get jittery?" And you're like, "Jittery from what? This is just how I function." Your cup is never empty. Your brain is never fully awake without it. And people act like you have a problem, but you're just maintaining baseline existence. So what's actually going on? Why do some people have 1 coffee in the morning and call it a day, while you're sipping your 6th cup at 8 p.m.? Let's break down the real psychology of people who treat coffee less like a beverage and more like a continuous IV drip. Number 1, you're not addicted, you're chemically dependent. Let's start with the obvious. Caffeine is a drug, a socially acceptable, legal, widely encouraged drug, but a drug nonetheless. And your brain has adapted to it. Here's what happens. Caffeine blocks adenosine receptors in your brain. Adenosine is the chemical that makes you feel tired. When you drink coffee, caffeine slides into those receptors like a key in a lock, preventing adenosine from doing its job. So you feel awake, but here's the problem. Your brain notices. It thinks, "Hey, adenosine isn't working anymore. I need more receptors." So it grows more adenosine receptors. Now you need more caffeine to block the increased number of receptors just to feel normal. This is called tolerance, and it's why your first cup barely touches you anymore. You're not drinking coffee to feel energized. You're drinking it to not feel like a zombie. Neuroscientist Stephen Miller found that people who drink coffee daily aren't getting a boost. They're just treating withdrawal symptoms they don't even recognize as withdrawal. Number 2, the ritual matters more than the caffeine. Strip away the caffeine and you'd still make the coffee, because it's not just about the drug, it's about the ritual, the sound of the machine, the warmth of the cup in your hands, the 2-minute break where you're doing something for yourself. Psychologist Wendy Wood, who studies habit formation, found that rituals reduce anxiety by creating predictable patterns in an unpredictable world. Your coffee routine is a series of micro-rituals that structure your day. Morning coffee signals the start of work mode. Mid-morning coffee is your first break. Afternoon coffee is the reset button. Each cup is a punctuation mark in your day. Remove the coffee and you'd feel unmoored. Not because you need the caffeine, but because you need the structure. The ritual tells your brain, we're transitioning now. New phase, reset. And in a world where work bleeds into home and days blur together, those ritual markers matter more than you think. Number 3, you're self-medicating undiagnosed ADHD. Here's something most people don't know. Stimulants affect ADHD brains differently than neurotypical brains. For people without ADHD, caffeine increases alertness and can cause anxiety. For people with ADHD, caffeine can actually be calming and focusing. It's why so many undiagnosed ADHD adults are heavy coffee drinkers. They've accidentally stumbled onto something that makes their brain work better. Dr. Russell Barkley, a leading ADHD researcher, explains that ADHD brains have lower baseline dopamine activity. Stimulants like caffeine increase dopamine, which helps with focus, motivation, and executive function. So when you say, "I can't think without coffee," you might be more literal than you realize. You're not being dramatic. Your brain might genuinely need that chemical assistance to access the executive function most people have naturally. You're not addicted to coffee. You're using it as unofficial medication for a brain that doesn't regulate attention well on its own. Number 4, it is an oral fixation to manage anxiety. There's a reason you always have something in your hand: coffee, water bottle, pen. Your mouth and hands need to be occupied. This is called oral fixation, a concept from psychology that describes the need for oral stimulation as a self-soothing mechanism. Babies suck their thumbs, adults drink coffee. Psychologist Dr. Meg Arrell explains that repetitive oral behaviors, drinking, chewing, smoking, activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which calms you down. Every sip of coffee is a microdose of self-soothing. You're not thirsty, you're anxious. And the act of bringing cup to lips, sipping, swallowing, repeating, is regulating your nervous system without you even realizing it. The caffeine might wake you up, but the ritual of drinking is calming you down. You're using coffee as an anxiety management tool disguised as a productivity enhancer. Number 5, it's become part of your identity. You're not just a person who drinks coffee, you're a coffee person. It's on your dating profile. Your friends buy you coffee-themed gifts. You have mugs with slogans like "Don't talk to me before my coffee." It's become a personality trait, and once something becomes part of your identity, you defend it. Social psychologist Dr. Dan Ariely explains that we protect our self-concept, even when it includes behaviors that might not be ideal. Admitting you drink too much coffee means dismantling part of how you see yourself. It means losing the coffee addict identity that's become comfortable, relatable, even charming. So when someone suggests you cut back, you're not just defending a habit, you're defending who you think you are. And that's much harder to change than a simple behavior. Number 6, you've trained your brain that performance requires caffeine. You've created a classical conditioning loop. You can't write an email without coffee. It's not that you literally can't. It's that your brain has paired work tasks with caffeine state so many times that now they feel inseparable. You've trained yourself to believe you need coffee to be productive. Studies on performance and belief show that expectation drives a significant portion of caffeine's effects. If you believe coffee makes you sharper, you'll perform better, even if it's decaf. This is called the placebo effect, and it's incredibly powerful. You might not actually need the caffeine, you might just need the belief that you're caffeinated. But that belief is so deeply wired now that going without feels like showing up to a test without studying. Possible but terrifying. Number 7, it's socially acceptable break permission slip. You can't just stop working and stare at the wall for 5 minutes, but you can make coffee, you can walk to the break room. You can stand by the machine and do nothing while it brews. Coffee gives you permission to pause without feeling guilty. It's a productivity culture loophole. Sociologist Dr. Juliette Score, who studies work culture, notes that modern work environments have eliminated natural breaks. But coffee breaks remain protected. Nobody questions why you're making your 4th cup. They just assume you need it, so you use it. Not because you need caffeine, but because you need a reason to stop that won't be judged as laziness. Coffee is your excuse to be human for 2 minutes in a system designed to extract maximum output. Number 8, you're trapped in a cycle. Here's the truth. You've thought about cutting back, maybe you've even tried, but withdrawal is brutal. Headaches, fatigue, brain fog, irritability, and it lasts days, sometimes weeks. So you have coffee to make it stop, and now you're back where you started. Psychologists call this negative reinforcement. You're not drinking for pleasure, you're drinking to avoid pain. The cycle becomes self-sustaining. You drink coffee because you're tired. You're tired because you drank coffee yesterday and your brain expects it today. You can't quit because quitting feels worse than continuing, so you stay stuck. Not because you love coffee, but because you fear the absence of it more than you dislike the dependence. And that's not a moral failing, that's just how chemical dependency works. Your brain has rewritten its baseline. And getting back to zero requires going through negative to reset. Number 9, you're drinking a memory of someone who's no longer there. Sometimes it's not about the coffee at all. It's about who you used to drink it with. Your mom who always had a pot brewing. Your best friend from college and those late-night study sessions. Your ex who knew exactly how you take it. You're not just drinking coffee. You're trying to hold onto a moment, a person, a version of your life that doesn't exist anymore. The taste hasn't changed, but everything around it has. And some mornings, pouring that cup feels less like a habit and more like a quiet ritual of remembering. You keep drinking because stopping would mean letting go of one more piece of them, and you're not ready for that yet. I'll be sharing more videos like this on emotional growth, psychology, and self-understanding. Subscribe if this content resonates with you. People call you gullible, naive, too trusting. They say you should have seen it coming, that the red flags were obvious, that anyone with common sense would have known better. But if you've ever been scammed and spent months replaying every conversation, every moment you should have questioned but didn't, there's a psychological reason that has nothing to do with intelligence. You weren't scammed because you're stupid. You were scammed because someone studied you, mapped your emotional responses, and engineered a situation specifically designed to bypass your defenses. While people judge you for falling for it, they don't understand how manipulation actually works. It doesn't target your logic, it targets your humanity. And if you've ever been scammed, you likely experienced these 7 psychological manipulation tactics that turn innocent people into victims. Number 1, they create urgency that shuts down your analytical thinking. It always starts with time pressure. The investment opportunity closes tonight. The charity needs donations before midnight. Your account will be frozen unless you act within the hour. The scammer doesn't give you time to think because thinking is dangerous for them. They know that your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logical analysis, needs time to process information. So they eliminate that time. They manufacture crisis. You're sitting at your computer reading an email that says your bank account has been compromised. Click here immediately to verify your identity. Your heart rate spikes. Adrenaline floods your system. And in that physiological state, you're not thinking clearly. You're reacting. Psychology calls this amygdala hijacking. When you perceive threat or urgency, your amygdala, the brain's fear center, takes control. It overrides rational thought because in genuine emergencies, analysis can get you killed. You need to act. The scammer knows this. They're not trying to convince you through logic. They're trying to trigger your survival response. So you click the link, you provide the information, you transfer the money, not because you're stupid, but because your nervous system is doing exactly what it evolved to do, respond to danger quickly. By the time your rational brain catches up and asks, wait, would my bank really email me like this? It's already too late. The scammer created a window of panic where your emotions drove the decision and your logic was locked out of the room. Number 2, they mirror your values and use them as weapons. They don't approach you with what they want. They approach you with what you care about. If you're religious, they're suddenly from your church. If you love animals, they're rescuing puppies. If you're politically passionate, they share your exact beliefs. This is strategic mirroring, and it's devastatingly effective. You meet someone online, they seem wonderful, you talk for weeks. They mention they volunteer at homeless shelters. You've always cared about homelessness. They share stories about the people they've helped. You feel connected. You feel seen. You think you found someone who gets it, who cares about the same things you do. And then casually they mention they're short on funds for next month's shelter supplies. Not asking, just mentioning. And you offer, because of course you do. This is what psychologists call value-based manipulation. The scammer researched you. They looked at your social media, your comments, your interests. They built a persona designed to match your identity. And when someone reflects your deepest values back to you, your brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. You're not just interacting with them, you're connecting. They're not a stranger anymore. They're someone like you. And that perceived similarity shuts down your skepticism. Research shows that we're significantly more trusting of people we perceive as similar to us. The scammer didn't find someone who shares your values. They performed your values. Every word calculated. Every story designed to make you think, finally, someone who understands. And by the time you realize they were lying about everything, you've already invested emotionally and financially. Number 3, they isolate you from people who would question them. The scammer never wants you talking to others about the opportunity, the relationship, the investment. They always have a reason. This is confidential. People won't understand. If you tell anyone, the deal falls through. They frame isolation as exclusivity. You're special. You're chosen. You're one of the few people smart enough to see this opportunity. And if you share it with others, you'll ruin it. So you don't tell your friend who would have asked questions. You don't mention it to your family who would have been suspicious. You keep it to yourself because the scammer convinced you that secrecy is part of the value. Psychology calls this calculated isolation, and it's one of the most dangerous manipulation tactics because it removes your external reality check. Your judgment, no matter how good, is fallible. You're designed to make mistakes. That's why healthy decision-making involves consultation. But the scammer knows that the moment you talk to someone uninvolved, someone without the emotional investment, the manipulation becomes visible. So they preemptively poison that well. They say things like, "Most people are too close-minded to see this," or "Your family will try to talk you out of it because they don't want you to succeed." Now, if someone does question it, you interpret their concern as exactly what the scammer predicted. Jealousy, fear, small-mindedness. The scammer has turned your support system into the enemy and positioned themselves as your only ally. And isolated without outside perspective, you make decisions you never would have made with input. Number 4. They use small commitments to lead you into larger ones. It never starts with a big ask. It starts with something tiny. Can you click this link? Can you fill out this survey? Can you donate $5? The initial request is so small you don't even think about it. You comply because it's harmless. But compliance is the goal. Psychologists call this the foot-in-the-door technique. Once you've said yes to a small request, you're significantly more likely to say yes to larger ones because humans crave consistency. You want your actions to align with your identity. If you've already helped this person once, saying no the second time creates cognitive dissonance. You donate $5 to what seems like a legitimate charity. A week later, they reach out thanking you and asking if you'd consider a monthly donation of $20. You've already identified as someone who supports this cause. Saying no now feels like you're contradicting yourself. So you agree. A month later, they ask if you'd be willing to make a one-time larger donation for a specific project. Each yes builds on the previous one, and before you realize it, you're not making isolated decisions. You're maintaining consistency with a pattern you started when the stakes felt low. The scammer didn't trick you into giving $1,000. They tricked you into giving $5, and your own psychology did the rest. Research shows that people will go to extreme lengths to appear consistent, even when consistency leads them into decisions they'd never make in isolation. Number 5, they weaponize your empathy by manufacturing vulnerability. The story is always heartbreaking. Their mother is sick. Their car broke down and they'll lose their job without it. They're struggling to pay rent after an unexpected expense. They're stranded in a foreign country. The details vary, but the structure is identical. They're a good person experiencing unfair hardship, and you're the only one who can help. This is empathy exploitation, and it targets the exact trait that makes you human. When you hear someone suffering, your mirror neurons activate. You don't just understand their pain intellectually, you feel it. Your nervous system simulates their distress, and that simulation creates an emotional urgency to relieve the suffering. You receive a message from someone you've been talking to online. They're crying. They explain their situation. Every detail is designed to pull at your heart. The sick parent, the mounting bills, the desperation, and they're not directly asking you for money. They're just sharing their pain, but the implication is clear. You could fix this. You have the resources they don't. And if you don't help, you're choosing to let them suffer. This is moral leverage. The scammer has framed inaction as cruelty, so you help. Not because you believe the story fully, but because the cost of being wrong, of letting someone genuinely suffer when you could have prevented it, feels too high. Psychology shows that empathetic people would rather risk being scammed than risk ignoring genuine suffering. And scammers know this. They don't need you to be certain. They just need you to be unwilling to take the chance that you're letting someone down. Number 6, they flood you with false credibility markers. The website looks professional. The email has an official logo. They send you documents with stamps and signatures. They mention partnerships with organizations you recognize. They show you testimonials from people who look real. Every detail is designed to signal legitimacy, because your brain uses heuristics, mental shortcuts, to evaluate trustworthiness. You can't investigate everything, so you look for markers. Does it look official? Do other people trust it? Are there recognizable symbols of authority? And scammers manufacture all of them. You receive an investment opportunity. The brochure is polished. The company website lists partnerships with major firms. The representative you speak with sounds professional, uses industry jargon, and sends you official-looking contracts. Your brain processes these signals and concludes, legitimate, but every single marker is fake. The website was created last month. The testimonials are stock photos with fabricated names. The partnerships are lies. The documents are templates, but you didn't investigate because the surface-level credibility was so convincing that investigation felt unnecessary. Behavioral psychology shows that we rely heavily on superficial credibility markers because deep investigation is cognitively expensive. We can't audit everything, so we use proxies for trust. And scammers know exactly which proxies your brain is looking for. They're not building a real business. They're building the appearance of one because appearance is all they need to bypass your suspicion. Number 7, they exploit your desire for a specific outcome. You want to believe the investment will pay off. You want to believe you've met someone who truly cares. You want to believe the opportunity is real. And that desire is a vulnerability. Psychologists call this motivated reasoning, where your brain selectively processes information to support the conclusion you want to reach. The scammer doesn't just present you with a lie. They present you with a lie you desperately want to be true. And your brain, faced with evidence that could go either way, tips the scale toward hope. You've been lonely for years. Someone starts messaging you. They're attractive, interested, attentive. They say everything you've wanted to hear. You know logically that it could be fake. But you also think, what if it's not? What if this is real? What if you're finally getting the connection you've craved? So when small inconsistencies appear, you explain them away. When they ask for money, you rationalize it. Because the alternative, that this was all manipulation, that the connection was manufactured, is too painful. Your brain protects you from that pain by finding reasons to keep believing. Research shows that people will ignore significant evidence of deception when accepting that evidence means losing something they desperately want. The scammer didn't just lie to you. They identified what you wanted most and built a lie around it. And your desire made you an accomplice in your own deception. I'll be sharing more videos like this on emotional growth, psychology, and self-understanding. Subscribe if this content resonates with you. Your birthday is in 2 days. Your friends are asking what you want to do. Your family's planning something. Your phone's about to explode with messages from people you haven't spoken to in months, and all you're thinking is, can we just not? While some people are out here treating their birthday like a national holiday, complete with countdowns and themed parties, you're hoping if you stay quiet enough, the whole day will just pass by unnoticed. So what's actually going on? So let's clear this up right now. Most people who skip their birthday aren't sad, broken, or emotionally damaged. They're just responding honestly to how birthdays actually feel. And once you hear these reasons, you'll realize you're not weird at all. So let's start. Number 1, birthdays create social work you didn't sign up for. Here's the part no one admits. Birthdays are labor. Think about what your birthday actually requires from you. You have to reply to dozens of messages. You have to act grateful for gifts you might not want. You have to coordinate plans or show up to plans someone else made. You have to be on for hours, smiling, thanking people, pretending you're having the time of your life when really you're counting down the minutes until you can go home and take off these uncomfortable clothes. And here's the thing nobody says out loud: acting grateful is work. Even when you are grateful, performing gratitude for an audience takes energy. You can't just say thanks and move on. You have to match their enthusiasm. Make them feel like their effort was worth it. And if 10 different people put in effort, that's 10 different performances you're giving. By the end of the day, you're not tired from celebrating. You're tired from managing everyone else's expectations of how you should celebrate, so you skip it. Not because you don't appreciate people caring, but because you've done the math. The cost of one birthday, in terms of social stamina, is more than you have to spend. You'd rather save that energy for things you actually want to do, things that fill you up instead of drain you. Number 2. You hate being the center of attention. Some people love the spotlight. You are not those people. Never have been. It's not trauma. It's not some deep psychological wound. Your brain just registers attention as deeply uncomfortable. Maybe you grew up being corrected in front of people. Maybe you were teased. Maybe you were just always the kid who preferred being invisible. Whatever the reason, being watched, being focused on, being the person everyone's looking at, it makes your skin crawl. And birthdays are designed to put you center stage. Everyone sings at you while you sit there, frozen, trying to figure out where to look. Do you look at them? At the cake? At your hands? Where do your hands go? What's the correct facial expression for this moment? You're hyper-aware of being perceived and you hate every second of it. Then the gifts. Everyone watching you open presents, waiting for your reaction, and you have to react right. Not too much, not too little. Just the perfect amount of surprised and pleased and grateful. It's a performance you never auditioned for. This isn't about control or autonomy or any of that. It's simpler. Being the center of attention feels bad. It always has. So you avoid situations that force you into that position. Your birthday is one of those situations, so you skip it. There's nothing wrong with that. Not everyone's built to be the main character. Some of us are much happier as background characters in our own lives. Number 3, you've decoupled self-worth from milestones. Some people see birthdays as proof they matter. A day dedicated to them, evidence that they're valued, but you've stopped measuring your worth by milestones. Not as a rebellion, not as some philosophical stance. You just don't see birthdays as meaningful anymore. The day doesn't signal value to you. It's just a day, one of 365, and treating it like it's special when it doesn't feel special to you seems pointless. This is pure indifference. You're not against birthdays. You're just neutral about them. They don't make you feel important. They don't make you feel loved. They don't make you feel anything, really, so you don't prioritize them. And when people ask why you don't celebrate, you don't have a deep reason. You just genuinely don't care. It's not a statement. It's not a mood. It's just how you're wired. Some things matter to you. Birthdays aren't one of them. And that's fine. You've realized that your value doesn't increase or decrease based on whether you have a party. That being celebrated doesn't make you more worthy. That skipping the day doesn't make you less. It's all neutral. And once you see it that way, the pressure to celebrate disappears. You're not skipping your birthday to prove anything. You're skipping it because it genuinely doesn't register as significant, and there's something quietly freeing about that. Number 4, birthdays highlight life comparison. Your birthday forces you to do a life audit because birthdays come with questions. So what's new with you? What are you up to these days? How's work? And if the honest answers are nothing, same stuff and fine I guess, you feel behind. Like everyone else is leveling up and you're stuck. Maybe you're 28 and you thought by now you'd have a career, not just a job. Maybe you're 35 and you're still single when all your friends are married with kids. Maybe you're 40 and you're still renting, still figuring it out, still waiting for your life to feel like it started. Whatever it is, your birthday is an annual reminder of the gap between where you are and where you thought you'd be. And celebrating that gap, celebrating another year of being exactly where you were last year, that feels absurd, so you skip it. Because if nobody makes a big deal about your birthday, nobody asks the questions. Nobody highlights the fact that you're another year older with nothing new to show for it. You can just quietly age without having to perform progress you haven't made. And look, this isn't about being ungrateful for life. It's about not wanting to celebrate when you feel like you're failing at it. When everyone around you seems to have their shit together and you're still trying to figure out what you even want, birthdays feel less like milestones and more like reminders that you're running out of time to figure it out. And who wants to celebrate that? Number 5, you've learned not to expect much. This one's not about childhood trauma or deep wounds, it's just, you've had enough birthdays to know how they usually go, people forget. Or they remember at the last minute and send a generic text. Or they say they'll do something and then bail. It's not malicious. People are busy, life happens, but after years of mild disappointment, your brain just stops flagging the day as important. You're not bitter about it, you've just learned. Expecting people to make a big deal about your birthday is setting yourself up to feel let down when they don't, so you've stopped expecting it. You've lowered your standards so far that if someone does remember, it's a pleasant surprise. If they don't, you're not hurt because you weren't counting on it anyway. It's emotional self-protection, but not the dramatic kind. Just the practical kind, the kind that says, I've seen this pattern enough times to know how it ends. Number 6, celebrating feels fake when life feels unresolved. You're not where you want to be yet. Your career is in transition. Your relationship status is complicated. Your goals are half finished. Your identity feels unclear. And in the middle of all that uncertainty, someone wants you to blow out candles and make a wish and celebrate another year of existence. But you don't feel celebratory, you feel incomplete, like you're in the middle of a chapter you can't close yet, and celebrating feels dishonest when nothing feels resolved. It's not depression, it's incongruence. The gap between what celebration requires, joy, gratitude, satisfaction, and what you're actually feeling, which is I'm still figuring this out. You can't fake joy you don't feel. Or rather, you can, but it's exhausting and it feels hollow. So you skip the whole thing, because you're not ready to celebrate a version of yourself you're not satisfied with yet. When you get to where you're trying to go, maybe then. But not now, not when you're still in the messy middle of becoming whoever you're trying to become. And people don't get this. They think you're being too hard on yourself. They say celebrate the journey, but you don't want to celebrate the journey. You want to finish it first. And until then, birthdays just feel like uncomfortable reminders that you're not there yet, so you'd rather skip the reminder entirely. Number 7, the day reminds you of aging. Every birthday is a number getting bigger, and that number matters, not because you're afraid of dying, but because you're aware of time passing. And the awareness that you're 32 now, not 25 or 40 now, not 35, comes with pressure. Pressure that you should have accomplished more by now, that you should be further along, that you're running out of time to do all the things you thought you'd do. It's not existential dread, it's just math. You thought by 30 you'd have X. You're 30 and you don't have X, so 31 comes and you're thinking, okay, one more year to get X, then 32, then 33, and the number keeps climbing while X stays out of reach. Your birthday isn't a celebration. It's a deadline reminder, another year closer to the age where people stop saying you're still young and start saying, well, it's never too late. And you're not ready for that shift yet, so you skip it. Because acknowledging your birthday means acknowledging the number. And acknowledging the number means confronting how much time has passed and how little has changed. I'll be sharing more videos like this on emotional growth, psychology, and self-understanding. Subscribe if this content resonates with you. It's 9 p.m., you just got home from work, your brain is mush. You open Netflix and scroll. And scroll. And scroll. 10 minutes pass, nothing feels right, everything feels like too much effort, so you do what you always do. You click The Office, your roommate laughs, seriously again. And you shrug. Because trying something new right now feels like running a marathon when you can barely stand. And it's not just The Office. You've watched Friends 6 times. That one comfort show, you've lost count. Your Netflix recommendations are begging you to try something new. But you don't want new, you want familiar. Your friends think it's weird. You already know what happens, they say. Yeah, exactly. That's the point. So what's actually happening in your brain when you keep rewatching the same show? Over and over and over. And why do some people chase new content constantly, while others keep returning to the same stories? This isn't laziness, this isn't bad taste, it's psychology, and the science behind it explains more about your brain than you think. Number 1, familiarity feels like safety. There's a psychological phenomenon called the mere exposure effect, discovered by psychologist Robert Zajonc. It's simple, the more you're exposed to something, the more you like it. Every time you rewatch that show, you like it a little bit more. Not because it's getting better, but because familiarity itself is pleasurable to your brain. Your brain interprets repeated exposure as safety. If you've seen it before and survived, it must be safe. This is evolutionary wiring. Our ancestors who trusted the familiar lived longer than those who constantly sought the new and dangerous. So when you're stressed, anxious, or overwhelmed, your brain craves the familiar because familiar equals predictable, and predictable equals safe. You're not rewatching because you lack imagination. You're rewatching because your nervous system is seeking regulation. And in a world that feels increasingly chaotic, that show you've seen 10 times offers something rare, guaranteed emotional outcomes. No surprises, no disappointments. Just comfort. Number 2, your brain is experiencing cognitive overload. Here's what's happening. You've made approximately 35,000 decisions today. What to wear, what to eat, which emails to answer first, how to respond to your boss. Every single decision depletes your mental energy, and psychologists call this decision fatigue. By the time you sit down to watch something, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and processing new information, is exhausted. Watching something new requires cognitive load. You have to learn character names, track plot lines, remember who's related to whom, process new visual information, follow unfamiliar pacing. Your brain has to work. But when you rewatch a show you've already seen, cognitive load drops to almost zero. You already know everything. Your brain can rest while your eyes are entertained. It's the mental equivalent of ordering the same coffee you always get instead of trying to decode a new cafe's menu. Not because you're boring, but because your brain literally doesn't have the processing power left for novelty. Number 3. Nostalgia is literally soothing your nervous system. You first watched this show during a specific time in your life. Maybe college when you felt more hopeful. Maybe during a relationship that's now over. Maybe before things got complicated. Research from the journal Emotion shows that nostalgia actually reduces stress and increases feelings of social connectedness. When you rewatch, you're not just watching a show. You're accessing a memory of who you were, and that connection to your past self is psychologically stabilizing. Dr. Konstantin Sedekides, who studies nostalgia, found it serves as a psychological resource during difficult times. It reminds you that you've been through hard things before and survived, that you felt joy before and can again. Every rewatch is like visiting an old friend who knew you when life was different. And that continuity, that thread connecting past you to present you, helps you feel less lost. You're not stuck in the past. You're using the past to steady yourself in the present. Number 4, you're using predictability as emotional armor. Picture this: you've had a terrible week. Your project failed, your friend canceled plans, you feel like everything's falling apart. You sit down to watch something. Are you going to risk a new show that might have a tragic ending? That might stress you out, that might make you feel worse. No, you're going to watch the show where you know everyone ends up okay, where you know the conflicts resolve, where you know exactly which moments will make you laugh and which will make you cry. This is called emotional forecasting, and you've become an expert at it with your comfort show. Psychologists have found that people under stress prefer predictable emotional experiences over novel ones. You're not avoiding life by rewatching. You're creating a controlled environment where your emotions are safe. Number 5, the peak-end rule makes you remember it better than it was. Here's something wild. You probably don't remember the show as accurately as you think. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman discovered the peak-end rule, which says we judge experiences based on their peak moment and how they ended, not the average of the whole experience. Your comfort show had amazing peak moments and probably a satisfying ending, so your brain remembers it as being better than it actually was. Every time you rewatch, you're chasing that remembered feeling, not the actual show. And here's the kicker, rewatching reinforces those positive memories, making you like it even more. It's a feedback loop. You watch because you remember it fondly. You remember it fondly because you keep watching. Meanwhile, new shows have to prove themselves from scratch. They're fighting an uphill battle against your brain's tendency to prefer the devil it knows. Number 6. Background noise meets your need for alone but not lonely. It's Saturday morning, you're cleaning your apartment, or working from home, or cooking dinner. You don't want silence because silence makes you too aware of your own thoughts, but you also don't want something that demands your full attention. So you put on that show you've seen 100 times. You can listen with half your brain, miss entire scenes, fall asleep, wake up, and still know exactly where you are. This is called parasocial companionship, the feeling of being with people even when you're alone. Studies show that people who live alone or work remotely often use familiar TV shows as social surrogates. The characters become companions. Their voices fill your space. And because you know them so well, it feels less like watching strangers and more like hanging out with friends. You're not watching the show, you're existing alongside it. And that's meeting a real psychological need for presence without the energy cost of actual socializing. Number 7, you've developed a conditioned relaxation response. Pavlov's dog salivated at the sound of a bell. You relax at the opening theme of your comfort show. That's classical conditioning, and it's incredibly powerful. Your brain has paired that show with rest, safety, and comfort so many times that now just hearing the intro music triggers a relaxation response. Your shoulders drop, your breathing slows. You feel your nervous system shift from fight or flight to rest and digest. This is why people have specific comfort shows for specific moods, one for anxiety, one for sadness, one for when you just need to zone out. You've accidentally trained your brain to associate these shows with emotional regulation. And now they work like prescription medication, but for feelings. You're not being lazy by rewatching. You're engaging in behavioral self-soothing, which according to therapists is actually a healthy coping mechanism as long as it's not your only one. Number 8, it's the antidote to choice paralysis. Netflix has 15,000 titles. Hulu has thousands more, Disney+. Prime, Apple, you have access to more content than you could watch in 3 lifetimes. And psychologist Barry Schwartz proved that too many choices don't make us happier, they make us anxious. This is called the paradox of choice. The more options you have, the harder it is to choose, and the less satisfied you are with whatever you pick. So you spend 30 minutes scrolling, nothing looks right, everything feels like a commitment. And you're already exhausted from making choices all day. So you give up and click on your comfort show because at least that's one less decision. You've opted out of the choice game entirely, and honestly, that's self-preservation. In a world designed to overwhelm you with options, choosing the same thing every time is actually a form of control. I'll be sharing more videos like